Now, this event is a counterpart to a book that our team recently published by the same name, where we set out to tell the story of the forces that have transformed Chicago into the global hub of innovation that it is today. And to tell the story, we interviewed 30 people who certainly played key roles in the formation of our local innovation ecosystem. And we have many of them here today to bring this story to life and lead today's discussion. There's 11 chapters in this book, each touching on key people, lessons, and moments that shape the blueprint for our innovation community. But the most important chapter for our city may well be the next one, the one that has not yet been written. As we emerge from this crisis, we'll need to draw on lessons past and present to rebuild and reimagine this next chapter for Chicago. Now, I'd like to hand it off to another co-author of Rising Together and the co-founder of Chicago Innovation and president of Kuzmarski Innovation, Tom Kuzmarski.
Thanks, Luke. Hey, it's wonderful to be with all of you today. You know what? This Chicago innovation community, in my view, is one of the best, if not the best, in the entire country. And the reason is because we have such a wonderful mix of large corporations, of small startups, of nonprofits, of performing arts, of government, of academia, education, et cetera, that really does represent a wonderfully unique and colorful innovation community. So Chicago in our book, Rising Together, really is a great acronym for the values that we see throughout the innovation community. And they spell city pride, Chicago, humility. It's about inclusion and that mindset that we have. Calculated risk taking. You know, other areas of the country, they'll throw money at new ventures, but we try to do it in a way that will ensure the optimal investment return. Altruism, true grit, and an openness and mindset. And that really does, in our view, represent the values that drive Chicago's uniqueness, that also explains how we built an innovation ecosystem over the past 20 years in this great city. And it also describes how we will rebuild Chicago after COVID. We're so thrilled that you're here today to listen to these great panelists and these great breakout room moderators. So Luke, thanks.
Thanks, Tom. And for all of you in the audience, you can learn more about the Chicago Way and get the complete story as told by Chicago's innovators on Amazon. And I'll also say that us co-authors, me, Tom, Paul, Kitty, Jig Sherman, we each make 23 cents every time someone sells a book. So, make sure to buy them because we're hoping to retire early with this one. So before we get started with the panel, I want to thank our year-round Chicago Innovation sponsors. These are the organizations that support everything that we do throughout the year, starting with our diamond sponsors, SMS Assist, Accenture, Wintrust, and Walgreens. Gold sponsors, Comcast Business and Exelon. Silver sponsor, Vedder Price. Bronze sponsors, Energy BBDO, Crown Castle, LK, Thompson Coburn, Granger, and our newest bronze sponsor of just a couple days ago, Ramsey Innovations. Our media partners, Intersection, Clear Channel Outdoor, WBBM News Radio, NBC Chicago, and Crane Chicago Business. Now, back to today's event. If you have a question for the panel, please send us your question via the Zoom Q&A. We'll spend the last few minutes of the panel discussion addressing your questions. And then we'll close with breakout room sessions so you can have a deeper dive discussion with your fellow attendees. Now, moving on to our moderator. Moderating today's panel is our good friend, Chicago Innovation Board member, and one of the true formative leaders of Chicago's innovation ecosystem, Matt McCall. Now, Matt is a partner at Pritzker Group Venture Capital, where his team has invested in over 60 companies and 500 financing rounds, including investments in startups acquired by Amazon, Google, Disney, and many others. It is my pleasure to hand the Zoom microphone off to you, Matt McCall.
Thank you very much, Luke. Appreciate it, and excited to be here. So we are at a very interesting crossroads here. Is what I've always said is that every 7 to 10 years, a brush fire comes through and resets things in the economy and life, et cetera. We've clearly had not so much a brush fire as much as a wildfire over the past year. And coming out of that, I mean, for those of us who've been in this ecosystem for the last 25 years, you know, during the dot-com bust and some of these others, we've seen when it looks the most despondent is actually where there's the most opportunity. So with that, what we'd like to do is I'm going to introduce the panelists and kind of dive into where do we see Chicago's future going and what role innovation can have. To start with, Hardik is the GM of digital governance, and he's been one of the mainstays here in Chicago for many, many years. He's now at Amazon, GM of digital governance for VCs and startups for Amazon Web Services. And previous to that, we all got to know him when he was the Chief Information Officer for the state of Illinois, and the Internet of Everything leader at Cisco after that. He's a Chicago Innovation Board member and a judge for the Chicago Innovation Awards. So Hardik, thank you very much for taking time to be with us here. Maria is the CEO of Leadership Greater Chicago, which is one of my greatest regrets when I was younger, not applying for that program, because all of my friends that did that program, first of all, the incredible network that they built and the leaders that they became. So she is CEO of an absolutely incredible leadership program, civic leadership program here. And I would argue that many of the current civic leaders today got their start many, many years ago through this program. Previously, she was the CEO of Girl Scouts of Greater Chicago in Northwest Indiana, a technology leader at Microsoft and Xerox. And Maria's on the Chicago Innovation Board and also serves on the board of P33. So thank you, Maria, for being here. Sam is the entrepreneur's entrepreneur. If you talk to any entrepreneur VC, at some point they're going to Sam for advice on how to scale. He's so hardy here. He's in the snow. His background there. But I've known Sam for going way back to his early days in OkCupid and SparkNotes, which he co-founded, and eventually, became the CEO of Match Group, where he oversaw Tinder, Match, and pretty much all the other dating sites. He was also the driving force behind helping with Troy Hinikoff and others launching Techstars Chicago. And until recently was the CEO of ShopRunner, which was acquired by FedEx just a couple of months ago. So Sam has been is just given back in so many different ways, both civically as well as publicly. So thank you, Sam, for making time for this. And Andrea has been very central to a lot of the ecosystem here in Chicago in her different roles each time. She's the managing director right now of Cleveland Avenue, which is arguably one of the leading accelerators for the next generation of food and beverage businesses. And if you haven't seen their operations and the facilities that they've built out for helping launch companies, next-gen companies in the food space, it's definitely worth a visit. It is quite an operation that you guys have built out. And before that, she was CEO of World Business Chicago. She's the deputy mayor of Chicago, the CEO of the Chicago Urban League. It goes on and on and on. And she's also on the Chicago Innovation Board as well. So, Andrea, thank you very much, first of all, for all you've done and for participating on the panel here. And then Brenna is the CEO of City Tech Collaborative, which is an accelerator that brings together government, corporate, and civic partners to tackle the city's needs. And previous to that, she was the Chief Information Officer for the City of Chicago and a senior executive at IBM, and really is a central player. We've seen this at 1871, which she's on the board of. Whenever we've had discussions about smart cities or the integration of how do we bring technology to really make cities and society a better place, she's really been at the nexus of all that. So with that, thank you very much, Brenna. So what I'd like to do is start on a positive note, which is, a lot has happened to Chicago and the U.S. in the past year. If you could share one quick thing that gives you optimism for Chicago's future. And so maybe I'll start with Maria.
Thank you, Matt, and hello, everybody. Well, when I think of optimism, I really think about the resilience that Chicago has in its DNA. We have demonstrated that this year. We have seen collective efforts that very quickly organized in response to the COVID-19 crisis in mid-March and have made tremendous impact on our neighborhoods. You know, we can see one of the earlier efforts was a collective philanthropy effort launched by the United Way and the Chicago Community Trust, the Community Response Fund, and also the Corporate Coalition, which is an aggregate of over 40 companies that are really looking at, okay, where do we go next with some of the things that are necessary for workforce and wraparound services for people who need support as they enter the workforce. And there's been a number of initiatives that have gained momentum as the pandemic grew stronger. In the face of social unrest, we have seen things at the ground level. We saw Alderman Mike Rodriguez and Matt DiMatteo, who is executive director at New Life Centers of Chicagoland, which is a young people's street outreach organization. And they came together to ensure that the brown and black communities would come together and not really be part of what could have been disruption in the 26th Street corridor in Little Village. So what gives me optimism is that you see from the grass tops to the grassroots, Chicago and its civic leaders. We have a city that has a DNA that, Matt, it brought us out of the ashes in 1871, right? A real fire that took us over and has repeatedly responded to what needs to be done. So our civic leaders give me optimism.
Yeah. No, very much so. And in fact, yes, 1871 was the mother of all brush fires. The resetting. Sam, what about you? You've been here at the ground level. What gives you optimism for Chicago's future?
I'd say the biggest change I've seen in the last, gosh, I guess I've been here 14 years now, has been just how much collaboration that I see across the different, both across sectors, but also within sectors, collaboration among entrepreneurs, among VCs, who of course are competitive in their own rights, but also very willing to help each other out, help each other's portfolio companies, et cetera. So I think that's probably number one. And I don't, I've lived in Boston, New York, and the Silicon Valley, and that level of cooperation and collaboration I have not seen in other places. So I think each ecosystem is unique, and I think that's a particularly valuable trademark of ours. I think a second thing is again in that same period. I remember Matt, when you and I were talking about Accelerate Labs in 2009. They're just there were plenty of people building businesses, but it was all very siloed. And I think when you look at just how it's now so widespread, we've just come such a long way in the last decade or so, and just in terms of the volume of innovation work that we're doing in the city. And I'm a big believer that innovation breeds other innovation. And when you see other people around you taking risks and failing and succeeding, and having people you can talk to and learn from and get mentorship from, I think it really changes the entire mindset that people have toward even what is possible. So I've just seen so much happen in the last 14 years, and I think if we keep that trajectory going, we're going to be in a great place.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you, Sam. I think the number of success stories and mentors that are out there to help the next generation reach back, and because as a community we like doing that. When you started SparkNotes, you could probably put those mentors around a poker table, right?
I mean, I remember for the first Accelerate class when we rented out the House of Blues for demo day, and everyone thought we were nuts. They were like, you can't fill the House of Blues, with people who are interested in startups. That's not going to happen. And sure enough, it was standing room only. So I think that's, I think there are people there, and that group has been catalyzed over the last decade.
That's great. So Chicago's innovation ecosystem has proven itself to be vital and resilient over the past year, with new levels of collaboration, as you just said, Sam, and amazing speeds of bringing solutions to the table. What are some of the examples of standout responses to this crisis you've seen from our innovation community? So maybe Brenna, if you wanted to jump in on that.
Sure. I mean, there's a number to pick from. I think one of my favorite was the company Reaply, who took their product, which was geared towards the higher ed space and creating a secondary market for research equipment, essentially, oversimplifying, but they answered the call from the mayor to create a market for PPP for small businesses in Chicago so they could open more quickly by getting access to that very, scarce PPP quickly through other Chicago companies. And I think that was, it was a vital service that was a great showcase for a Chicago startup, but that also made it possible for Chicago small companies to reopen and keep their businesses running. So that's probably my favorite example.
Yeah, no, that was very powerful. And with MHub and everyone else starting to kind of draft behind that, that was incredibly powerful.
Absolutely.
Andrea, what about you? What have you?
So Brenna stole my favorite, but my second favorite is MHub and 1871 coming together to develop and then open source ventilator, an affordable ventilator that at the time ventilators were hard to come by and people were looking for them, and so they came together. And then they also built that brought together that whole network of organizations to come together in the innovation space to work together to come up with solutions and ideas for needs. And so I just think it just points to what Sam said about that idea of collaboration. People didn't just work in their silos to figure it out. People came together to see what can we do together. There's also one more would be Koval and coming together to turn their distillery into a maker of hand sanitizer, which is kind of tragic in its own right? Like taking the bourbon and making it hand sanitizer, it just seems wrong on 1,000 fronts, but was needed at the time and really just one of the many incredible things that happened.
It was the best tasting hand sanitizer. Way that gone. So we all have had reasons for coming to Chicago and for building our careers here. But what will draw future generations here? And more importantly, what will keep people here? And so maybe Hardik, you've seen a lot, and now from your perch at Amazon, you've got a really interesting perspective. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. And I think, again, here's the thing, right? I've hosted, Michael Krause and I have hosted you guys, many of you guys at the Mayor Daley's Technology Council in the last decade, last as in the previous one, the 2006 to 2010 timeframe. And at that time, we were all kind of talking about how do we build our innovation ecosystem, the startup ecosystem. And at that time, we were talking about, we've got this great 4 Rs, river, rail, road, and runway. I think we already have that. But beyond that, now we've got this great 4 Cs, which is the code, capital, customers, and connections, which is what startups and the innovation ecosystem is looking for. And that's what we also have, like successful entrepreneurs, like we've got Sam right here on call with us, with Jay Shekhawat, Sean Chow, Chris Gladwin. We've got some amazing role models who are actually circulating capital in Chicago. We've got P33 working very hard to change our image worldwide. I think that's where we need to work a little bit harder on, where the narrative of Chicago, even when people talk about violence, they bring Chicago, they bring Al Capone. We need to start changing that. Even when they talk about politics, they bring Chicago, they bring Illinois, which is also, Andrea can attest to that Chicago and Illinois politics is changing quickly. The governments are working very hard to kind of invite people, keep them here, grow our economy, and so on and so forth. I think I'm very, very positive about all of the reasons why Chicagoans would stay here and why future generations would want to come here. The one thing we cannot change is weather, but I think we should deal with it. I think this is the best place to get all 4 weathers. You won't get that in Florida, won't get it in Texas, you'll get it here.
And with global warming, it's playing to our strengths here. It's funny because I remember I had a series of board meetings in 2006, 2 in the Valley, 1 in New York, and I looked at the sales pipeline of every single one of the companies. And there was this huge bar of the region that was Midwest, where all of our sales were coming from. And then there was a smaller bar, and it was Northeast, and then a smaller bar with West Coast. And I had that epiphanal moment there, which is, wait, there are more Fortune 500 companies here than any other region in the US. And let's be honest, that is the lifeblood of innovation. You either get, customers that are paying you money or not. And so I've always found that was, amongst other things, including community, really powerful and important here. Sam, what about
So,
you?
hey, Matt, I know I just want to touch back on that climate change thing you talked about. I do want you to just note that we are incredibly climate change resilient. We have water. We're not at risk for some of the weather issues that they have on the coast. And it's going to matter and in the coming days, and particularly when it comes to cost, when it comes to disruption. When you think about some of the disruptions that have happened on the West Coast and the East Coast. So it really is not a small thing. And given that climate change is continuing and increasingly to have impacts on businesses and on where people want to live, that we are incredibly resilient and have that as a strong strength for where people might want to be. So I just don't want to, since you touched on it, I thought I should highlight that we're not going to be on fire anytime soon.
Right, or flooding or the many other things.
Matt, I'd like to build on something that Hardik said, which is, that we have a lot of strengths here to attract people. And as being part of P33, one of the things that I think we all need to begin to capture in memory are some of the reasons why people should come to Chicago. There's a lot of competition for cities, for talent, especially those who are leaving the coastal hubs. But we have an incredibly compelling story. One, we have an incredible diverse economy with no single industry capturing more than 14% of the market. We have 6,151 tech companies, and that's more than all but 2 cities in the United States. We're ranked very highly in the production of STEM business and management degrees. We're 3rd in computer science, 7th in STEM, and we're a really affordable city. If you look at San Francisco has a cost of living that is 64% higher than Chicago. So despite our weather, we have real livability here. And, as Hardik mentioned, P33 is focused on activating our tech community, bringing it together, our community, so that we can have opportunity for everybody. And I think as we become our city's best cheerleaders and our city's best spokespeople, there are reasons why people should come to Chicago and why they should stay here. We have lots of opportunity and great opportunities for people to remain here.
But well said, very, very well said. And so Sam, as you think about it, you're fairly close with the entrepreneurial community here, and with the next generation of entrepreneurs coming through. What do you see as the draw for them? What are you seeing that are keeping people here or drawing people to this region?
Well, we have to do a better job keeping our entrepreneurs here. I mean, I don't have to name all the folks who have had, some of our most successful founders and exits are no longer Chicago residents. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that trend is slowing, actually. I think we've had 2 high-profile departures just in the last year at least. So I think that's a concern. Look, I think the reason people come here is, it gets back to what I said earlier, you have to have a lot of opportunity. There just has to be volume, right? I mean, if you're a banker, you go to New York. If you want to be an actor, you go to LA. And if you want to be, in tech, you go to San Francisco, right? You go because you know that if the first gig doesn't work out, the next gig will. You know that if you sit at a coffee shop, you're going to have, serendipity with someone else that is like-minded and has interest. So, I think that, the diversity of our economy, while generally I think is a positive for us, it's not obvious we're the place to go if you want to be great at, building a technology company or building a startup. And so I think we have to really, do a much better job marketing the volume of companies we have. And, a lot of people don't know that some of our successful companies are based in Chicago, right? People just assume, oh, if it's a tech company I know, it's probably based in the Valley. So how do we go out and tell the story of Chicago and some of the technology successes that we have here?
Tom, do you have any ideas? So Maria, this leads to a great question, which is around the notion of what can our Chicago leaders, public and private, do as we emerge from the crisis? Especially, Sam was saying, there are a number of things going on here that are, some headwinds.
So I think one of the things that Sam said earlier is one of our real points of leverage, which is that amazing collaborative spirit that is alive and well in Chicago. And it's a collaborative spirit that crosses sectors. I think because we have such a diversified economy, we don't silo in groups and, birds of a feather fly together. Everybody is sharing. But I think one of the things that I think we need most of right now is agility. We can't admire a problem and ponder about it. This is a moment in time for leaders to not be paralyzed by not having perfect data, for leaders who can think innovatively and have an entrepreneurial manner, and to seek out collaborations. The time is prime for those who want to collaborate, want to seek opportunity together, and opportunity not only for the gain of an organization, but also for the gain of making strides as a Chicago, for everybody in Chicago. So I think for our leaders, this is a great time for collaboration, for decisiveness, for vision, for risk-taking in some areas. And it's an opportunity for us to close some of the gaps in Chicago by working together.
And obviously we have a number of larger issues that I think some of our top state and city leaders are going to need to start facing around some of the financial issues we've got in taxes. I think if we can get through those, which are in many ways driving a lot of this exodus that Sam was talking about, we have a lot as a city going on for us. And if I went back to '95 when I got into business originally, it's exponential how far the city's come. And so there's an amazing foundation to build upon. But I think we all need to continue to state our voices here as it relates to some of our public and private leaders. Hardik, you've got a great perspective upon which to take a look at Chicago, especially as we are vis-a-vis other cities. How is Chicago posed for its future as an innovation tech hub, and how healthy is our startup community here?
I think we're very, very well poised, Matt. From Regroup Therapy to ShipBob and Catalytic to Prefix Health. I mean, we've got some amazing startups, and now they're late-stage startups that are growing very quickly. Chowbus is an example. It's a niche food delivery service that is coming out of Chicago 12 years after Grubhub was founded. So we are still delivering new companies in the same area of service. And I think the likes of OCA Ventures, you at Pritzker Group Venture Capital, Chicago Ventures, HPA, I think all of them are extremely active in the early stage. MDP, GTCR, GTY, all of them are pushing envelope. People like Sam coming back to Chicago, reinvesting capital. You've got Jay Shekawith, Chris Gladwin, all of them putting their capital back, their intelligence back, their talent back. And then on top of that, you've got Tom and Luke. They keep hitting the innovation home run out of the park every year. I think, and again, by the way, I will say this, I've got this book in my backdrop since I got it. They get 23 cents per book. I don't get anything, but I still make sure that they keep talking about it. And, I think we are very healthy. I'm very, very bullish on our ecosystem.
And by the way, I do want to give a shout out. When I talk about what is unique about our culture here, it's about the successful generations reaching back and pulling the next generation behind. Sam, when he took over as CEO of ShopRunner, insisted that the company be headquartered in Chicago. That was huge, right? Mike Gamson, same thing, right? He is doing everything he can to back entrepreneurs here, build community. So I think one of the strongest things we have here as a community is the fact that the successful entrepreneurs like Sam, Mike, and others are really reaching back and helping pull up the next generation, which you don't always see in other regions of the U.S. So, Brenna, what are Chicago's most urgent problems right now that require cross-sector collaboration, and what should our innovators be focused on?
I think because of the time of history that we're in, there probably isn't a list of problems because they're all problems right now. Which isn't to mean I feel pessimistic about that, but I think the good news is that Chicago can match all of the problems that it has right now with the amount of entrepreneurs and innovators that we have to solve those problems. And whether the problem that moves you is public safety or education, or the fact that we are essentially going to have to remake our downtown because that office space capacity is not going to come back at 100%, and we're going to have to do something about that space. And these are things that actually I think inspire our tech community in Chicago, right? These are big mountains to climb, and I think we have a history of solving those really big problems. I think the problem that underlies those that we have to solve is to stop waiting for government to step in and actually solve those problems. That's actually not what Chicago's history has been, right? Anybody who reads about the Chicago fire would actually know that what came out of that was civic leadership, right? Corporate leadership stepping up to figure out how to make sure Chicago survived that and came back stronger than it had before, right? That was not a government initiative, that was a civic initiative. And I think that is where you see efforts like P33, et cetera, coming from, is the fact that we need partnership with government, but we can't rely on government to solve any of those problems. So I think it is actually beholden on people in our tech community, for whatever problem inspires them, to reach out and say, what can I do? Get involved. And if you don't know where to go with that passion that you have, you can probably ask, frankly, anyone that's sitting on this panel, or anyone over in Luke's shop, and they can help you find someone that will put you to work if that's the problem you want to help to solve.
I think that's great advice. The saying in venture is always, or entrepreneurship is, action trumps anxiety at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Can I add one more problem, Matt? I think brain drain to Dallas is the biggest problem for Chicago. Brenna would agree with that, Brenna?
I be on that train every day. I'm flying up as often as I can as it is.
So one last question here is for Brenna, which is, what advice do you have for everyone tuned in today about how they can go about discovering their role in Chicago's next chapter of building and thriving?
I always think you should go back to what it is you're good at. I think that Chicago needs everybody we have. You asked that question before about why, what drew you to Chicago, and why do you think people come here? And I think it's Chicago's diversity in a general sense, right? No matter what you love or what you're good at, Chicago will meet you there. And so I think Chicago is going to need every one of us on this call today, and your friend who didn't make it. And so whether or not you care about making sure that, one example, that kids who love music can find a home to express that love in Chicago Public Schools. So we have a thriving music program. Or if you're going to make sure that you take your success as a founder and mentor the way that Sam does, or that you invest the way that Hardik does, that you take that initiative and express that love and desire in Chicago, because there's room for everyone and what they want to invest in. And it's just a matter of, I think, Matt, what you just said, is a matter of taking action, right? There's enough anxiety for everyone now. And so it's a matter of just taking that first step. So finding your spot in Chicago, I think, is as easy as saying, my spot is around love of music, love of food, walking out to my community and picking up trash on my street corner because it needs to be picked up. There's room for all of those activities and for everybody who wants to do them.
Yep. And Andrea, what would be your advice?
Well, I agree with Brenna, and we've heard a lot about our diversity, both of what we have, and both in terms of, but also of the people. But one thing I think that's come out of COVID, and there have been some highlights around the disparity, but there's also a lot of opportunity for re-engagement. I mean, we love being together, and we can't wait to find the times when we can be together face to face. But in the meantime, these digital platforms have been able to help us provide all kinds of access to people that might not have otherwise had access. And so I think finding ways to elevate that and continue to push that, particularly into communities of color, to ensure that they can be leveraging the benefits of what's happening digitally and providing so that you can teach a class for students in CPS from your home now. If you want to, you can volunteer to train, to mentor a student that lives in Inglewood if you live on the North Shore, if you choose to, without having to go there. So those opportunities are there. We just have to make sure that we're continuing to push to provide access, because we still do have a significant digital divide. But the opportunities to come together and collaborate are there. So I back literally everything that Brenna said, but I also want to encourage you to not limit your thinking, but also be recognizing that we have way too many people still who don't have the kind of access that we have to the digital world. And it is absolutely where everything is happening today.
And I think one other thing is, from just looking at the future of work stuff that I've, deals and ecosystem that we've been looking at, the world is increasingly moving towards people being hired for jobs versus people being hired for skills, like, the Accenture liquid workforce. And so the advice I've given my daughter as a junior in college is, I've said, here's some Coursera classes in accounting or in AI. You can take free classes at Harvard, MIT, Coursera, Udemy, whatever. And I think the most important thing people can do is continue to lifelong learning, is build your skills based upon invest in yourself, based upon a lot of the virtual stuff that's out there. And then get involved in the community where it makes sense. Terrific. Well, Paul, I think there have been a number of questions that have come in from the audience. So I'll turn that over to you in terms of just picking some of the more interesting questions.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we had a few that came in. I'll start with one from David. He's asking, how is Chicago capitalizing on the exodus from the California and New York tech scenes for newer opportunities?
All right. Who would like to jump in on that?
So I can start, and then others jump in just from my WBC days. So, we have a number of companies that have come, people who've come home from the coast to Chicago. And I think, Maria touched on some of the assets we have in terms of talent. It is absolutely a focus of both P33 and Chicago Next at World Business Chicago, who both of whom run a number of programs to encourage both companies, but entrepreneurs and talent to come here. But I think we also have the challenge that I think both Hardik and Sam touched on, of elevating our profile. We're still not, it's still too often when we do talk to people who are interested in coming here, too often when we show them what we have, they're surprised. They're like, wow, I didn't know that was here. And that's a problem, because if you don't talk to them, they don't know. So I think we still have a lot of work to do to push on what P33 and others are doing to promote or elevate our profile. But when people see the profile and the community that we have here, they come because it is an environment where they want to be. But we have work to do to elevate it.
And Sam, what are your thoughts following up in your earlier comments?
I actually think, I don't know what we're doing, to attract the companies. I do think, I think the ability to work from anywhere is going to have a dramatic, it's a double-edged sword. I have just in the last, just this calendar year, I have lost talent to coastal companies paying coastal comp to my very happy Chicago talent, with the promise of being able to just stay right where they are and never have to go anywhere. So that I think is a challenge for us. I think on the flip side is, we now, the Chicago companies are really unconstrained in our ability to attract talent. And, now that should put an end once and for all to, can I build the team I need in Chicago? As Matt said earlier, I conditioned to my taking the Straupner CEO job was to move the company here, to move HQ here. And I plan on doing that for any company I run going forward, is you've got to move HQ to Chicago. But I do think the differing talent, the differing views on geography with respect to talent will be a very important thing for us to watch.
Yep. Great. All right. Paul, what's next on the list?
All right, here's a question from Hugh. He's asking, how do corporations become more integrated and help drive the Chicago innovation ecosystem aside from standard sponsorships and pay to play?
What do you think, Hardik?
I think talent, just getting the right talent in the corporation. I mean, we are hiring aggressively at AWS, and at the same time, I think other corporations are also hiring and getting the right talent. I think I just also saw another question from Yana from DePaul about keeping the talent, the grads here. That's another thing that the corporations, I know back in my state days, corporations like Aon and others had started the apprenticeship programs. But I think those are kind of things that the corporations had to step up and create opportunities for startups, create opportunities for the grads, and basically just drive the ecosystem here. And that, to me, would be a great role the corporations have been playing and should just step up a little bit more. Great,
thank you. And I think on this next question that Shannon McGee asked, I would argue that regions take off based upon certain sectors or industries that they have historical resources and advantages at, right? So if you think about, the storage capital of the world became Boulder, Colorado, because IBM located the storage division there, and it spun off a whole bunch of startups. So you begin to get legacy. So Shannon asked, where do you see the greatest opportunities for innovation in Chicago, both sectors and industries? So maybe Brenna, I'll throw that to you.
I think, and I almost want to toss this over to Maria, because I think this is one of the things that P33 spends a lot of time thinking about. But I think that we spent some time at City Tech looking at transportation in general, but looking at last mile freight and logistics, because that's an area when you ask the historic question. And again, I feel like I'm getting really close to where Sam probably needs to step in, because I don't have a lot of depth here, right? But you think about historically, right? Chicago in the center of the country with the rail, and then add on to that the airport and the airports, and then all the truck interchange, right? We have a history of around freight and logistics, and then you add on top of that all of the startups that come into play more recently, right? So we have a historical foundation, and then the more recent innovation in that space, right? So clearly that's an area where without any purposeful collaboration, right, we're putting wins on the board. And I can only imagine what sprinkling some purposeful collaboration on top of that would actually do for that industry.
Maria, what about your thoughts?
So I think, there's a couple of areas that we are looking at in P33. One of them is quantum and the potential that quantum offers. And Hardik may want to weigh in on this, but quantum really offers an opportunity for us as a city, and there's a race, right? There's a race going on right now surrounding quantum. The other thing is that we also have, because of the diversity of our portfolio economically, we have companies that devour data. We have pharma, we have financial companies, we have insurance, we have all of these companies that offer opportunities for data analytics, for people who are in data analytics, and for going, figuring out what's the next stage of innovation for the use of that data and where we go with it. So I think that we're looking for where can we create those pockets that will attract either the entrepreneurs that will go into an area, or private equity that will go into a particular area, or how can we attract the talent that might be currently involved in, for example, the data analytics field, and begin to build an ecosystem of and capacity, critical mass of people who have those skills that when we do launch quantum, we can plug them into that. And Hardik, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
No, I think that's perfect. I mean, CQE, the Chicago Quantum Exchange, which is Argonne, Fermi, University of Chicago, and other universities coming together to build that, can give us a big edge. Waterloo is doing fantastic in the quantum space, which is 5 years from development. You see Amazon coming out with QLDB. Microsoft announced as part of Azure a new quantum service that's coming in preview. So the large corporations, large cloud providers are also creating instances and services that would basically now bring quantum more in the mainstream. So all of those things are really And that's where Chicago needs to be. The beauty of Chicago, I believe, is we have deep tech, like, Chris Gladwin's storage company and now the database company, and we have consumer tech between what Sam's doing and what so many other successful entrepreneurs are developing. So we've got both ends going very well, both deep tech as well as the consumer-focused companies. I'm very, again, as I said, I'm very bullish about where we are.
Terrific. Well, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be on this panel and for all your thoughts and the mass experience and wisdom that you guys brought to the dialogue today. And with that, I will hand it back over to Luke.
Great, thank you, Matt. And thank you, Hardeep, Maria, Sam, Annie, and Brenna. As we all expected, you are all wonderfully insightful on our panel today. And we really appreciate everything that you're all doing for Chicago's innovation community. The city would certainly not be where it is today if it was not for the 6 of you. So thank you. Now, next up, we are going to keep this train moving ahead. We're going to get more interactive with everyone who is here today by doing 15-minute Zoom breakout sessions led by some other prominent Chicago leaders that we interviewed for Rising Together. And so I'll let you know who these people are right now. We have breakout rooms that will be led by Sandy Castro, the CEO of IC Stars, Mark Schiffman, CEO of SMS Assist. We have Michael Kraus, the founder of Market Strategy Group, Carolyn Collins, CEO of Dimension Inc., and then also Linda Dara, who's the Larry Levy Executive Director and Clinical Professor in the Kellogg Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. You know, anyone with a long title, they have a lot going on. So we've got a great group of breakout room moderators. I will be a 6th moderator as well. And the discussion questions for each group, it's going to center on the following one single important question. 10 years from now, when people think of Chicago, what do you want them to think of? And how do we get there? So I guess it's 2 questions. So what do you want people to think of 10 years from now about Chicago? How do we get there? After about 15 minutes, we'll then reconvene back into this main room where our moderators will share a 1-minute summary where we can hear everything that was learned from each group. So with that, Paul, I'll let you magically whisk us all away to our breakout groups. All right, I think we are all back now. If other groups were like ours, you know, we were on a roll. We could have kept going without a doubt. So I apologize if anybody got cut off, but we want to spend some time now, just for 5-6 minutes. If you think that was breakout, this is now share out. So here's an opportunity for each of the moderators. We're going to go around the room, each share for about 60 seconds or so, some kind of key lessons, key themes, key insights with the group, and then we'll wrap up and call it a day. So I'll go first from our group. In terms of what we want people to think of Chicago 10 years from now, a way I would maybe sum it up just from our conversations would be the city that solved inequity that exists in a big city. And we talked a lot about, you know, just starting off the fact that there's a south side, there's a north side, there's a west side. You know, how can we get it to be one Chicago? And a lot of that has to do with education and where investments are made in education, fixing the digital divide. And the county, for example, is doing a lot of great work there. You know, we need to tackle making the city more affordable for everyone. You know, some positive conversations was actually from 2 big companies in our group. ComEd and LinkedIn are both doing a lot to invest both in talent and in technology, and how both of those were important. And then also investing in transportation, which really would be building on a strength, both within the city and making it a more globally welcoming place to be. So that's kind of a quick summary. Maybe I'll jump to, let's see, no particular order. How about Michael Kraus next?
Okay, so Luke, we had a great discussion. Lots of ideas, and we should share these ideas with Michael Fosnack, you know, as Chief Marketing Officer and now Head of World Business Chicago. You know, we are the most collaborative. We are a great value. There's so much desire to be a leader in sustainability. We have culture, we're an influencer, we've got education. But if I came around to some really, you know, Trevor said towards the end, he's new to Chicago. We're a place for unbridled opportunity that's welcoming. And others said, you know, we're the city that acknowledges innovation is for everyone. You know, there's this desire to solve those urban problems, make sure that everyone gains, and place for unbridled opportunity that's welcoming.
Love it. But a lot of optimism, a lot of positivity in your group. I love it.
We got a
That's what's
great
important.
group.
It builds on itself. All right, let's bounce over to, how about Linda?
Sorry, we had a little technical difficulty, so we did a real pop quiz to get things going here. But I think what we kept on hearing was, our strengths are collaboration or diversity, but at the same time, diversity, we haven't really tackled across all neighborhoods. So there was a real desire between education and reaching out and making, it's only when we all come together and we really have momentum on DEI, which came out a number of times, will we be able to really get to that richness and collaboration that brings everyone together. And so kind of we came off at the end with kind of our little statement of that we want Chicago to be known as a place where you can work, live, learn together, and how we have to do that is to listen to each other.
Yep, well said. Excellent. So collaboration, building on diversity. And I like you mentioned the word momentum. Coming out of COVID, I think there's an opportunity for some new momentum to start fresh. So excellent points. Let's bounce over to Mark Schiffman.
Thanks, Luke. Our group had a great discussion today. We talked about Chicago as the center of the innovation ecosystem for the entire world. And how do we do that? We solve big problems of the future. We talked about living in a city that's perfect to raise families, to make a good living, with people who are employed, who are helping companies grow through innovation and creativity. And the jobs of the future are really now. We talked about having the right tech skills, the human skills, the creative skills, and a ton of discussion around diversity and bringing everyone in to help solve the problems at hand. We said the future is informed by the past. We're a city of architecture, and focusing on health and well-being, that we've pivoted since COVID. And what have we learned, and how can we have a more diverse view on what the future means for buildings and for the health, safety, and well-being around water and clean air. And Chicago can solve these problems and make a big name for themselves on the world stage.
I love it. The problem-solving center of the world, Chicago, Illinois. All right, let's move to Carolyn.
Yeah, we had a great discussion in our room as well. And again, I think this theme of inclusiveness continues to keep coming back, and as a way to celebrate the communities that we have. We talked a lot about the vibrancy of the different neighborhoods we have, from the Miracle Mile to various neighborhoods all around the city, and what we could do to really support those different communities in a way that stops having us so fragmented and actually begins to create a more integrative and inclusive and cohesive innovation community. There were a couple of examples that were brought up that I thought were really interesting, talking about what CNI is doing in the Pullman neighborhood, with the Chicago Prize going to the Auburn Gresham neighborhood, and being able to celebrate kind of the uniqueness of different communities, where you create kind of centers of gravity within those communities that cause people and draw people into those. So, every community having almost its own innovative spirit that then also creates some cohesion process as well.
Yep, love it. Well, it's a city of 77 neighborhoods, and there's lots of special things with that throughout it. Let's we like to start strong and end strong. So Sandy, that's why we left you for the last one to share. Go for it.
Yay! Well, we had a great conversation in our group. And it's funny, but because I think that the echo runs through all the groups around how important it is for us to really leverage the wonderful diversity that's in our city. And racial equity, that was a big part of things, but also about people, like investing in people, and that people are our truest asset. And then we had some teachers in our group, educators, and we really talked about education and how important it is as a foundation. There was talk about arts and how arts are flourishing in every school as being part of the picture of 10 years from now. And then water and optimizing our natural and human and technology resources. And so I think the theme for us is we already have all the stuff, all the raw materials, all the great people. We just need to leverage it. And at the end of the day, the 10-year vision is that we have a city that is creating opportunities for everyone.
Well said. Great one to end on. And by the way, Sandy, your enthusiastic yay actually got my dog barking. There was so much excitement that just leapt right off of you into my living room here. So everyone, that wraps it up for today. I want to thank our moderators, our panel speakers, everyone who tuned in. And in closing, the title of this event and our book, Rising Together, is a very intentional name. Rome wasn't built in a day, and Chicago won't be rebuilt in a day either. And it's really going to take all of us. And just hearing all the ideas and excitement of the people in this room, like Hardik, makes me feel very bullish about the city. And it's on all of us to keep helping the city experience its full potential. So I want to thank everyone here for what you've already done and what I know you will continue to do to make our city great. So take care, everyone, and we hope to see you at our future Chicago Innovation events this year.